meeting. It is Tuesday, August 10th, and it's 2021, and it is 9 a.m. There's, of course, some housekeeping I need to do because of the protocol associated with COVID, and I'll read that at this point. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A14, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the pandemic of COVID-19. The members who are electronically present at this meeting are, please state your name, Brian Williams.
Present.
Diantha.
Present.
John, are you here? John needs to turn his audio on.
I am present.
Okay. Olga, are you present?
Yes, yes sir.
Okay, and of course myself. All right. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in this electronic meeting are posted in the Albemarle County website calendar at www.albemarle.org and at www.publicinput.com/PDCAC. All right. I'd like to welcome our visiting supervisor, who is Donna Price from the Scottsville District. Welcome, Donna.
Good morning. Thank you, Richard, for inviting me.
All righty. Now it's time to approve the minutes of June 8th. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. And then now's the time, of course, for matters before the public. And Chief, this is a time at which the public can either make suggestions, recommendations, or concerns on their part. Have we received any from the last meeting to this meeting?
We have not, Richard. I have not received any emails, phone calls regarding our CAC meeting.
All right. Any accolades or compliments and officers doing a good job?
We've actually received quite a few since our last meeting, praising officers. I got one just yesterday involving a man and his son that were involved in a traffic crash, and they commended one of the officers for showing compassion and helping them through a traumatic incident. So it was very nice to see that. So we have received several of those since the last meeting.
Well, it sounds like we continue to receive nice accolades over there at the police department, which is a clear sign the public sees Albemarle County as doing a nice job. All right, moving forward, Chief, is there a way at which the public, our neighbors, our fellow citizens, what is the best way for them to approach the Albemarle County Police Department and say, I have a concern, a recommendation, an accolade? Tell us a little bit about the best way to reach you. And are you the person that actually reviews these civilian suggestions / complaints?
Great question, Richard. The best way to get a hold of us, if you have a suggestion, complaint, compliment, is ask the chief at albemarle.org. I get those into my inbox. Cindy gets them as well. So somebody's always, Cindy, I think there's a couple other people that get them still. So everybody in a small group gets them in their inbox. That way we make sure we don't miss some of them. And I see every one of them. So if I'm not responding to them, Cindy's sending them to the right person in the organization that they can answer their question and direct them to where they can get the resources they're asking. So it's ask the chief at albemarle.org is the best place.
Okay, then moving on to new business. Of course, the general legislature has put together in 2020 the Community Policing Act. And as part of that, the police departments are required under 52-30-.1 as effective as of July 1 to present a report addressing many of the things that are involved in the scope of what's required in the Community Policing Act of 2020. And so as a result, welcome Deputy Chief Jenkins to bring us up to speed on and provide us this comprehensive report. And of course, this is being recorded so that the public can view this and get a better understanding of our compliance associated with this. So with that, I'm going to let you go ahead and do your thing, Greg, and thank you for coming here today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hewitt and members of the CAC. As Mr. Hewitt said, I'm Greg Jenkins, Deputy Chief of Police here with our Support Services Bureau in the Albemarle County Police Department. And I want to thank you guys for allowing me the opportunity to share this information with you guys this morning. I'm going to switch over here and I'm going to share my screen with the committee so you guys can see my PowerPoint. Okay, that didn't work. Let me try it one more time, guys.
We see it now, Greg.
You see it from the beginning, Chief? It keeps doing funny things to me over here on this end. Let me try it one more time. Now you see the slide deck, correct?
Yeah, I'm seeing community policing report traffic data 2000. There, just moved.
Yeah. Click on slide 1.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go to the from the beginning so we could start this thing. Just so you guys know,
I think we're at the beginning. At the page I'm viewing at right here is Community Policing Act of 2020. So that's the first page on the identifications and reports that I have here. So now it disappeared.
Yeah, it's my computer's acting up a little bit, Richard. Pardon me for just a second, guys.
Sure, take your time. It's important we get a view of this.
It's not allowing me to start from the beginning, but I'll go ahead and get started. As many of you all may know or may not know, in March of 2020, the General Assembly started looking at the mechanisms to put in place for police departments to be able to document traffic stops that police officers are encountering our residents and motoring public. With that, in March, they settled on a number of criteria, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. It is exactly what the state statute requires law enforcement agencies from across the state to do. But I thought it was important that we talk a little bit about some of the things that the Albemarle County Police Department, in conjunction with our Board of Supervisors and our County Executive's Office, had done prior to the Community Policing Act. In, I would say, early 2017, approached Chief Lance about moving our police department to a digital or an electronic summonsing initiative for our police department. And what that electronic summonsing would allow us to get rid of all of our paper handwriting summonses that our officers would write on the street. And it allowed us to move to an electronic summons, which allowed officers to use a scanner, scan the registration, scan driver's license, populate a summons. And it allowed the officers to spend less time on the highway, safety, and those type of things for our motoring public. So in 2017, we drafted an executive order and presented it to our Board of Supervisors for approval of an additional $5 fee to be assessed to those individuals that are convicted of any offense in our three courts, the Circuit Court, General District Court, and our Juvenile Domestic Court. And our board saw that this was a way for our police department to be able to sustain this type of a system without each year having to budget out of our budgeting process to pay for things like hardware, software, any of the components that we have to use for the electronic summonsing. So as you can see, July of 2017, the board approved that. Again, it does allow us to use those funds for the hardware, software, and any of the components for the summonsing equipment. And we, at that point, when we started rolling this program out, we started with our traffic unit, making sure that the system was working well. The system, so you know, requires the officers to have one signature copy per the Supreme Court requires us to do that. So when an officer writes a summons, it will automatically upload in here to the police department. And it's fairly instantaneous. Once the summons is issued, they get to a hot spot in the county, that summons will upload to our server here in the police department. And you can see that it certainly improved our accuracy and the data that we're collecting in the field. As I talked about before, the safety, we just really felt that it allowed our officers to interact with the public, but it also shortened the amount of time that the officer and the citizen spent along the shoulder of the road, which we felt was very important for safety purposes. And that goes back to that time, improved time. You know, typically for one summons, it will take probably anywhere from 6-7 minutes to write a summons. Now today, it'll take us 3 to 4 minutes to write an electronic summons. Talk about the General Assembly. When the General Assembly passed the act, our electronic summonses were already being utilized to capture the required data. So what I had to do at the chief's direction, I remember very vividly, he met with Danish Rod with the Chiefs Association, the Virginia Chiefs Association, DCJS, all chiefs and sheriffs across the state to really figure out what this process was going to look like. He immediately contacted our vendor at Digiticket and asked them if we could capture these data fields through Digiticket, and they said yes, if we could. So we worked with them. We worked with the Virginia State Police, and we entered criteria into it. But the one great thing, Ms. Price and Ms. McKeel, is the cost. The General Assembly didn't think about the cost that it was going to take to implement this process, right? They just said they wanted it done. So we realized that we could use Digiticket. The $5 additional fees helped us actually pay for the money that it cost to upgrade our system, which was about $7,000 at the time. So the system was upgraded, but in the meantime, in early 2018, Chief Lance was approached by the FBI. They wanted us to be one of the agencies across the state that voluntarily participated in the collection of use of force data through the FBI. As we all remember back several years ago, there was not a very good tracking system on use of force in police departments. So the FBI asked the chief, and he approved internal affairs commander to start capturing that data through our Blue Team. And it's Blue Team is one of our internal affairs systems that help us capture this data. So now that data gets forwarded to the FBI on a regular basis. Shortly after that, Chief Lance was again approached by the state police and DCGS and asked if we would volunteer to help piggyback on this Community Policing Act to help us collect resident information on traffic stops. That's not a requirement by the state statute, but we felt in an effort to be more transparent and to help us gauge. So we have our demographics in the county, but we wanted to really see, okay, are they city, county residents that are violating the traffic laws, or is it motoring public coming in and out of the county? And what does that look like? The chief authorized us to participate voluntarily in that program as well. So we're doing that currently, and you'll see some of the data that shows that we are tracking some of that information. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from this is we're not just collecting this data to make sure we're in compliance with state law, but I know that Chief Lance and all of the commanders review this data every month at our monthly CompStat meeting. And we actually take a deep dive into it and ensuring that we are not disproportionately charging or targeting any minority residents or people that are motoring through Albemarle County. We look at that on a monthly basis. And then a comprehensive report through DigiTicket is created and it's sent to the state police for auditing purposes. And at the end of each year, DCGS will put a report together and share it with law enforcement agencies across the state on exactly what each jurisdiction is doing. This is a look at the community policing requirements. I thought it was important for our members here to see exactly what the law does require of all police departments and sheriff's departments. As you can see in 2020, the law didn't require us to capture information on pedestrian stops or non-consensual investigatory stops. So in the special session before July 1st of 2021, they included in the state statute that now all non-consensual stops have to be included in this data collection sets as well. But I thought number C was probably one of the biggest things to highlight for our committee here this morning. As you can see, each time a law enforcement officer or a state police officer stops a driver or a motor vehicle violation, this is the data that's required for officers to capture through DigiTicket. So when they move through the electronic summonsing process, these fields are mandatory to be able to be filled out before they can move on to the next section. So some of this stuff can't get missed inadvertently. So these are mandatory fields that have to be filled out. Person searched, vehicle searched, and things like that. So as we move through the next slides, you'll be able to see a lot of what this data looks like. We talk about collect the number of complaints that agencies receive regarding use of force, and we had been doing that sometime before this requirement.
Deputy Chief, I'd like to hold on for a moment here, and I'd like to go around the room here with the members and see if they have any questions at this point for you from what you've presented so far.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Williams, do you have any questions at this point in terms of the legislation and what you've heard up until this point?
No questions at this point.
Okay. Diantha, do you have anything for the Deputy Chief at this point?
Just a clarification, just make sure I understand. So, Greg, the data that the state police are collecting and we're collecting is merged into a database.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we have access to it. When we have access to it, well, of course, we have our own data, so we can separate it out, but it is merged together, and local police agencies have access to that data. I just want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this.
Yes, ma'am. That is my understanding. The way this is going to work is once the data is all collected by DCJS, so it goes to the state police first, and then the state police gather all of the data from police departments and the sheriff's office and send it in a format the Department of Criminal Justice Services. And Diantha, what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to put a report together to where all of the chiefs and sheriffs can view the data collectively across the state to see how departments are performing and that kind of stuff. I haven't seen one of the reports yet come through, so I'm not exactly sure what it will look like. I know the state police has been working very vigorously to try to to figure out how to collect the data first, and then how to push it to DCJS. And so it's ever changing. I couldn't believe, when we talked about this, we did the first part of the statute, and then the next year in the early session of the General Assembly, they started changing things again, requiring additional data sets to be collected on traffic stops. And then they included non-consensual pedestrian stops as well. So it's going to look different for a little while because it has changed since it's been implemented.
That's great. Thank you. I think you've answered my question, and I am glad to hear that sheriffs are included because, of course, they have to be, because we're only one of, I think, 3 counties in the state of Virginia that has a police department and a sheriff's department, right? So I think I'm right on that. It could be. Anyway, thank you very much. That was helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. John, do you have anything for the deputy chief at this point?
I do have a quick question. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, John.
The question I have is regarding the data that is being collected. Is it tied back to an individual, or is it only available in the aggregate?
Well, John, right now we present it in the aggregate, but if we see, the chief sees, or our internal affairs commander sees that there is a particular problem, we can actually go back in to the data and find the officers or identify the officers where there's a problem.
Well, I'm talking about the individual who was, let's say, stopped. Is this information available to identify that individual?
No, when we are required to post this data out on our internet sites for the police department, it's required to be transparent and it's out there, but it's in the aggregate. It does not show the individual.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And also, how long is the information maintained?
We're going to maintain it permanently, and we have it categorized on our police department website, and we're running it every month. It gets posted. So if someone wanted to come onto the website and look at last year's data, they could do that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Olga, do you have anything for the deputy chief?
Not at this time.
Donna, do you have anything for the deputy chief at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt, and Deputy Chief Jenkins, thank you for the information. What it appears is not unusual that when a new system comes into play, there are going to be tweaks and revisions to it as realize what data is being collected and what additional data may need to be collected. And then I think Mr. Springett just brought up, one of the other things is how you can then access and use that data. So I think this is a great step towards being able to identify where problems may come up. Please note that I said where problems may come up, not where problems currently exist, because I think Albemarle County Police is doing a great job, but this is a wonderful tool as it all gets kind of fleshed out to help us be able to see where problems may arise. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, well, one other thing I would mention as chair is this goes to the chief. Chief, should there be a pattern that arises that's somewhat onerous and of concern to the county, that of course would need to be brought to this committee as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're referring to, Richard, if we see an officer, particular officer making stops in a certain manner.
Yeah, what I'm saying, if an onerous pattern arises that that you over there at the police department sees, we would request that pattern and concern be brought to our attention.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, so let's move on there, Deputy Chief, to the next slide here.
Yes, sir. So making sure that the committee is aware that the data is a 6-month overview of the data since January of this year. So I didn't want you to think that this was a full year of data collection. But you can see over the past 6 months, we've had just over 2,100 total traffic stops. And then again, on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the race of the driver that was stopped, and it breaks it down by white, black, unknown, Asian, or American Indian. And then to the far right, you can see the ethnicity of each one of the drivers. So at the very bottom, 71% of the drivers that are stopped by our officers are white individuals, 18% are Black, and 8% are Hispanic. This data slide here shows out of those same 6-month comparison for traffic stops, this breaks down the reason for the stops. So you see the primary reasons our officers are stopping folks are traffic related events. And then the next reason for stops are calls for service, when a citizen would call in to the dispatcher and it's dispatched out to a police officer. Equipment violations, other. And then here is where we started tracking the non-consensual pedestrian stops. And you can see how that data has started to populate inside the data sets as well. And then we have one checkpoint.
Major Jenkins, can you explain to the group what a non-consensual stop is? They may not understand what that means.
Non-consensual stop, let's say we get a call for service and a description's given of a suspect, white male, blue jeans with a Hawaiian colored shirt, with a very distinct ball cap. And the officers responding to the scene, and that person they see a person on that's fairly close to the area that they're responding to, and they make a stop on that individual. So that's considered a non-consensual stop. Did I hit that okay, Chief?
Yes, thank you, Greg.
Yes, sir. On the far right of the screen, committee members, you can see that the actions taken by our police officers. So you can see that 74% of all stops result in a traffic citation. And one of the great things that our chief wanted to make sure that we brought with this system was the ability to capture information on warnings that our officers give our pedestrian or our citizens, our motoring public. Before DigiTicket, we didn't have the ability to be able to capture this information. Now we have the ability to capture this data. And when we did the disproportionate minority contact study, that was a data set that was missing out of that study. And now we have the ability to track that as well. So I intentionally highlighted that warning because I thought that was very important. That was a data set that we were certainly missing up until just a few years ago. And now we're able to capture that data. But as you can see, 76% of all whites that are stopped receive a traffic summons, 23% receive a warning. Black population, 64% receive a summons, 35% receive a warning. And our Hispanic population, 79% receive a summons, with 19% receiving a warning. This data set here goes in and shows the age ranges of the motorists that our officers are dealing with. And when I took a look at this, I noticed, and you guys can notice as well, our 20-some age group they're most likely to commit these offenses by 28%. And then surprisingly enough, myself, that age group of 50 plus, 5% of the drivers encountered. And it just breaks it down. We would think that our teens would be that age group, but it's not so much. It's only 9%. And then we move over to the right part of the screen, and you see the data that's being captured as far as people being searched, whether it's drivers, passengers, any occupants of the vehicles. And you can see out of this 6-month data, just over 2,100 traffic stops, we had 51 incidents where people were being searched. And then again, it gives 45% were white, 37% black, 16% Hispanic. And then below that, we talk about the vehicles that are being searched at the traffic stops. And then again, it breaks it down by whites, blacks, and Hispanics. And to sum it up, with this being the last slide to the PowerPoint deck, with the same data, we wanted to show everyone exactly some of the reasons for the stops, the amount of summonses that were being given for the speeding, miscellaneous general, registrations, licenses, motor vehicle safety equipment violations, and then you have reckless driving, improper drivings. And you can look at the very, very bottom, and it gives you a breakdown on non-whites, white non-Hispanics. We talk about the top 5 charges of reasons why our officers are stopping people. And in the middle of the data, we show 370 black subjects, and there are the top 5 charges that they're being stopped and charged for. And then to the very far right, you can see the Hispanic subjects, 173, and the top 5 charges that they're being stopped and summoned for. And I believe that is the last slide of the deck. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right, well, this is probably a good point to start going around the room and members having questions for you, Deputy Chief.
Yes, sir.
Let's start off with Brian Williams. Do you have any questions for the Deputy Chief?
Deputy Chief, first of all, thank you so much for your presentation. It was great. I
Yes,
just
sir.
have a question, and it's based upon some work I've done. 99 to 2001, I was one of the research consultants with the San Diego Police Department, analyzing their traffic stop data. One of the things we found in San Diego, it's hard to pinpoint who is the driving public in San Diego because it's a military town, a tourist town, a border town. And that's one of the things I thought about too with this presentation in terms of when we think about Charlottesville. I'm somewhat new. I've only been here a little over 3 years, but the medical center attracts a lot of people. The university attracts a lot of people. Were you guys able to kind of get a sense of how that might skew who is the driving public within Albemarle County?
Yes, sir. And if you remember back to the very first slide of our PowerPoint, that's one of the things that Chief Lance was asked about by the Virginia State Police and the Department of Criminal Justice Services. It's always been a concern of ours. And when we talked about the disproportionate minority contact study, we had a very difficult time discerning, a lot of Albemarle residents carry a Charlottesville address in its title, but they live in Albemarle. So we really needed to figure out how we could really break that data out. And the chief has authorized us to voluntarily participate in part of that data collection sets. And I have asked our DigiTicket vendor to add that data set into our collection data points. So I'm hopeful, Mr. Williams, that we will get a clearer picture as we move through this process. I do know that they have added that as a data point that we want to get collected on each one of our stops. So I hope that answers your question, sir.
Would that be in the fields that would be required in terms of you generating a ticket? It would be a required fill out?
Yes, sir.
And Brian, do you have any recommendations of what the language might look like or suggestions for that maybe the deputy chief hasn't thought of?
Not on the top of my head. I would have to give some thought to it in terms of that language, but I think it's just clear to make sure that we all understand that it's difficult to really pinpoint because of some of the factors we've discussed in terms of who is that driving public and how that complicates things. Oftentimes we will try to equate these stops based upon the demographic makeup of the county. And that's one of the concerns that I would kind of make sure that people are aware of, that it's hard to do that because Charlottesville is Charlottesville, Albemarle County is Albemarle County. And when we think about those who travel this way, who go through this way too, will kind of skew the data. But I think it's just clear. I think it's needed for the public to understand that we have to really try to unpack this and untangle it. And it might not be a perfect way in doing that with that process.
Right. I think a lot of what you're asking as well is, you know, it's really the officer that's encountering that person on the street to make sure that they ask that question. You know, do you live in the city or the county? Are you out of state? You know, that type of thing. So yes, sir, I understand.
All right. Well, moving on. Diantha, do you have a question for the Deputy Chief?
I just want to make a comment real quickly because it gets to the great question that Brian just asked. And while it's probably anecdotal, when a few years ago, when Albemarle County was doing a lot of work with our court system and where our courts were going to be, remember back then, I remember one of our local judges saying to me, I am amazed, Diantha, how over the last several years, the number has increased in my court on UVA students. He said, I am seeing a lot more UVA students in my courtroom. And he was relating it to parents coming down and trying to find our courthouse in the city. And that's a whole nother story. But it was an interesting comment. And it gets to what Brian, I think, is part of what Brian is asking about. And it's a really good question. I am, as always, very appreciative of how thoughtful and deliberate we are in Albemarle County, our Albemarle County Police Department. And I really thank you. You are leaders in the state for many of these projects that we start and work through. And I just really appreciate that. And I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Okay, then. John, do you have something for the Deputy Chief?
No real questions, just a compliment to the chief and his leadership in the state. It's really a great thing, and couldn't ask for better work. And thanks again, Greg. Good presentation.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, John.
Olga, you have something for the Deputy Chief?
Maybe you already covered this. I think I might have missed it, but when will things be available to the public that are a little bit more recent as far as data? Because I do think there's a huge, I don't know, it seems like in our society, people see create, I guess, in their heads, very different numbers than what you just showed us. You know, the data clearly shows that white folks are pulled over a whole lot more often. I mean, like incredibly more often, and that's just not the perception. And so, just a couple of things that are being done to help that, to show people what's actually going on, what the data actually shows, and what we can do to help that as well.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. You could direct folks to the Albemarle County Police Department's website and send, I think it's Dana Reeves, who is on this call with us. She is ensuring that every month this report is generated, that every month that report gets posted on our website. And it is updated as soon as the monthly reports run, Olga, it's posted out on our website for public view.
Is that something you guys would consider sharing on social media? Or, I mean, I'm definitely not an expert on, if that could be worse or better to do that. So just a thought.
Well, actually, that's an excellent thought because the perception, of course, is different than the numbers that I'm seeing. Chief, have you considered?
Right, I'm not actively announcing it, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Chief, have you considered sharing this with the media?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we put it like Major Jenkins said, Richard, we post it on our site. We go over it monthly. Now, I have not been asked by the media yet for this information. The media is aware that we do this, and I would be more than happy to present the numbers to the media. And to Olga's point, I I don't know if I would do a monthly, but maybe a quarterly, because sometimes when you over social media, and Danny can shake her head and agree with me, and when we do something, it gets lost and doesn't have the value. So maybe something quarterly, we could put it out on all of our social media platforms. I think that was a great point, Olga.
Well, I mean, it's certainly a good tool to for those that are under the impression that the numbers are skewed differently. I mean, this is clear evidence that Albemarle County is doing a stand-up fair job, and that's Olga's point. How do we communicate this? Because this is evidence that the county police department is doing a fine job, and maybe the Daily Progress needs to know about it. But I'll just leave it at that.
And being in social media, we can all share it too, and people share, and that's obviously how we get to not just people that are super fans of the Acpd, but actually get to the folks that it needs to get to.
Yeah, well, this helps change minds.
Hopefully, yeah.
Donna, do you have anything for the deputy chief?
Well, actually, I want to follow up on that last chain of conversation, and I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but I don't think you can draw the conclusions that it sounds to me y'all are drawing from that data, because the simple number of or percentages of stops is irrelevant if you don't know the base population from which the people are being stopped. And so, yes, while the higher percentage of people being stopped or vehicle searched is of white individuals, there's a substantially higher percentage of white population in our area than there's Black or other minority groups. And so I think you've reached or are reaching for some conclusions that are not going to necessarily hold up if you don't look at the total base population. If you have 65% of the population being stopped as white, but 90% of your population is white, then that's not a positive number, because that's showing that 35% of the stops are Black drivers, but your population of Black population, the Black population percentage may only be 15%. And so those numbers actually skew the opposite of what I was hearing in that last conversation. So I think more information needs to be evaluated before any conclusions are being drawn. Another thing that I would hope is that rather than the officer having to collect all of that demographic data, that once the driver's license is scanned, that there would be a technological capacity to go into databases and be able to pull up some of that information. And I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here. Back when I was the Assistant Deputy Judge Advocate General for Management and Plans, which was a fancy name for being in charge of numbers and people, we developed within the JAG Corps a database system called JAGNIS, Judge Advocate General Management Information System. And its death knell was the fact that it required the people entering the data to take so much time to collect all of these data points to then be entered in, that it was just killing people, the amount of time that was required. And one of the great benefits of the Digiticket that I heard is you've reduced the danger time that an officer is on the side of the road from 6 or 7 minutes down to 3 or 4 minutes. And that is really important for the safety of those officers as well as the people that they may pull over. So whatever can be done to make more efficient the gathering, entry, or collection of the data rather than the officer making the stop having to do it, I think would really be beneficial. Overall, I'm very pleased with what I hear. I think this is a great step forward. It still has some work to be done to reach the level that we want. I really appreciate the opportunity to listen and be part of this. Thank you.
All
Welcome.
Right. Deputy Chief Jenkins, we need you to wrap it up, and then we have other agenda items.
I think Diantha has a question, Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry, Diantha. Go ahead.
Okay, just a quick question to piggyback on some of this. I remember, Ron, when you all put out the annual report, we discussed putting the demographics in along with that report. So, and that gets to what Donna's talking about, and the percentages would be very helpful. And it just occurred to me, everybody that lives in our area has a Charlottesville address. So if you use the driver's license, well, they have Scottsville addresses. Donna's shaking her head. There is Scottsville. But I'm trying to get at, you know, we are kind of all lumped together. Help me with how you differentiate. Maybe I missed it, but what Donna said just made me think about our Charlottesville address. Now we have zip codes, but the zip codes aren't clear either. So how does, just a thought.
Then you have university students.
Yeah, I mean, that does complicate it, I guess. And the other only quick thing that I want to add is this would be, I was just last night participating in an NAACP meeting. This would be a great presentation to the NAACP. And Ron, I know, and Greg, I know you all and Sean have reached out and participated in their meetings before, but they would be very interested in this. But if you could to expand the information when you make that presentation to get at what Donna was suggesting would be very good as well. And I'd love for the Board of Supervisors to see it. Those are a couple of ways to get it out into the community. Thank you.
Okay, anything else to wrap up there, Major Jenkins?
No, sir. That concludes my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, well, I speak for everybody in thanking you for a job well done. And we look forward to seeing more information as we go down the road.
Yes, sir.
All right, Chief, we have a couple of items before we knock off here. One of the things is, let's talk a little bit about what we are all very concerned about is, and the outstanding job your department's been doing, and that has to do with morale and staffing.
Absolutely, Richard. Thank you for the opportunity to close us and talk about some important topics, kind of update. I like to call them the chief updates. Just to give you all a perspective today as we're sitting here together in this meeting, what our staffing looks like. We are currently only down 3 positions right now. And that's unheard of in today's law enforcement world because our neighboring jurisdictions are a lot, excuse me, a lot worse off than we are as far as open positions concerned. I know I talked to UVA recently, they're down 17. I think the city's down 30 something positions. So we're sitting at 3, but we're also keeping an eye on the ball because we've got 6 or 7 retirements coming up between now and October. So we're continually hiring. So with us continually hiring, we are doing different things we haven't done before. The foundation gave us some funding beyond our normal recruiting funding so we could get some radio and TV time to put our recruitment video out there. Our recruitment team, which is very diverse, is really being super active and looking for certified officers. And I've mentioned it to this group before. I like certified if they're not running from something and they can meet the standards of the Albemarle County Police Department. If they can't, then I don't hire them. So we have had a lot of certified officers apply that I have not hired that are currently with other police departments. So I'm hopefully optimistic that we can continue to stay on course for our staffing because that also helps with morale. It's not all unicorns and rainbows. We have, what, Greg, 9 people on light duty. We have 7 people, 8 people that are still in field training or the academy. So I just named 16 officers right there that aren't on the street. So yeah, we say we're down 3, but we still, we're still working through numbers and staffing issues, but we're in a much better place than we were years ago. So I'm optimistic about that. Richard, to your point about morale, it could not be more timely time for me to discuss it. We just finished our survey that we completed. I believe it was in May, and the entire county does it. Each department does it. And I sat down with the deputy chiefs when we got it, and I had a very good 2-hour conversation with Mr. Richardson, our county executive, and said you couldn't have put a survey in front of police officers at a worse time than they actually gave us this survey than during COVID, and probably one of the worst years I've seen in law enforcement for morale across the United States. It was, not a good time. But with that being said, me and the 2 deputy chiefs sat down, and I wanted to flush out common themes, and that's what I wanted to attack, stuff that jumped off the survey to us as areas of concern that we wanted to address. And a couple of the things that we've addressed, and we've already developed an action plan to address those concerns. Communication is one of them. They feel that we don't communicate enough. The deputy chiefs and I kind of scratched our heads because I feel like we over communicate, but we all can do a better job of communicating. So we own that, right? The feeling of not feeling valued popped up as well. And that's popped up in every year that I've been here. So we've talked about all the things that we do to recognize good work. You know, we do the foundation awards, we do Officer of the Month, Officer of the Quarter, Bureau awards, we do recognition and roll calls. We do a lot, and the foundation does a lot of things. So we're coming up with other ideas of recognition to make sure if it's something as simple as, hey, good job on that DUI arrest last night. You got somebody off the street that, you know, potentially could have harmed somebody. So trying to get people to do that more often, that was a concern. And biggest concern, because they gave this one, supervisors, before they learned they were getting a 5% pay raise, was our pay. I mean, it took a hit, that they did not feel our pay was competitive. They didn't feel their pay, again, goes to value. They didn't feel they were being valued for the work that they do, in their words, not mine, risking their life every day in a job that's very difficult and a time that's very difficult, particularly the last 16 months. So pay was an issue. But now we get the 5% pay raise. Thank goodness it bumped our pay scale back up because it was froze last year. Thank you, board members. That went a long way with morale and helping people. As many of you know on this call or on this meeting, a lot of my officers live paycheck to paycheck. So an $80 bump or $100 bump in that paycheck's a big deal to them when they get that check. So that's kind of, I know I talk a lot, Richard, but I get excited about it. That's kind of, you know, where we are with staffing, where we are with morale. Good news, two deputy chiefs and I are sitting down tomorrow. We just gave a lieutenant's promotional process, a first sergeant's promotional process, and a sergeant's promotional process. So with the upcoming retirements I mentioned earlier, it's an opportunity for our up and coming leaders to get promoted. And we just completed those processes, and I've got a list, and it gives me an opportunity to promote some people. And that's the best time to be chief, is hiring somebody, promoting somebody are good days to be chief. So they'll be happening soon. I think September, Sean, October timeframe, we'll be making promotions. Is that right? So that's what we're looking at for that. And I was happy with the number of folks that came out and actually took the process. Over the years, it's been fewer. The number has grown, so I was very happy with that. The only last thing that I want to talk about, I don't know how many people got to get over there, but we did National Night Out last week. And
Chief, let me ask you one question. Did you mention something about the cameras?
Yes, I will. I'll mention that after National Night Out. Thank you for.
Okay, very good, very good.
Thank you. National Night Out last week, we hadn't done it in 2 years, as you all know, because of COVID. And National Night Out has been going on since 1984. The media covered it. I did interviews with every newspaper, every radio station we have in the land, and it was they really gave us a lot of good coverage. We did it Fashion Square Mall. I was concerned how many people were going to show up. I got there at 5 o'clock. By 5:15, the people were rolling in. We had a great showing. People came up to me, thanked me. People want to get out and talk to the police again. They've been cooped up. Thanks to the staff. I thanked everybody the next day. It's a lot of logistics to get all of our, as I call them, toys, equipment over there for the community to see. But my goodness, what a great opportunity for us, because you guys know Acpd is all about the community relationships. And as long as I'm chief, we'll continue to do that. So huge kudos to the police department and the community for coming together.
And that was located at the front of the Fashion Square Mall in that vacant lot, not far from the bank.
That's correct. Yeah. Right. Body cameras, Richard. You want me to touch on that last?
Yeah, because last week we talked a little bit about. Pardon me. Two months ago, we talked about body cameras, etc. And I was wondering if you could provide us some sort of update as to how that's rolling along.
Absolutely. So I asked Kevin Miller this morning for an update, so I have timely information to provide to the committee. The cameras have all been ordered, and he says our first camera should arrive the first week of September. So we're coming close for that. Right now, the policy that we did, and we did the policies with IACP best practices and all that, and we meshed them into ours, is still with legal. So legal's reviewing our policy. Once all that's done, the policy's in place, the cameras are in place, we're going to start training our officers. And the first shift that's going to get trained is going to be evening shift officers. And we're hoping that'll be in the September timeframe to be able to get the cameras in and get the officers trained on them. But I'm not deploying, I'm going to say it twice, I'm not deploying the cameras until every officer's been trained on them, every officer knows the policy, The community knows our policy. It's going to be posted so the community understands it. And we're going to do this right. And we've taken a long enough time to do it right. I watched so many departments around us not do it right. And you learn from others' mistakes. And that's what we've done. So we want to make sure our policy is the right policy. It's why legal is really scrutinizing it. And we also want to make sure our officers understand legally when the camera needs to be turned on, when the camera needs to be turned off, and FOIA and all those other things that are associated with the body-worn camera program. And I'm so grateful that we already had in-car cameras. This is just another step, but we had in-car cameras, so the officers are used to being mic'd up. So the transition is going to be they're going to have a camera on their chest all the time, not just on the dashboard. So I'm looking forward to that program getting rolling.
I think that's great. You're going to take the time and get it out correctly.
Absolutely.
The public doesn't want mistakes with this, so that's fabulous. You're going to be very thorough. All right, you have we have a couple of minutes. You have anything else you'd like to share with us, Chief?
That's all I had. If anybody had any questions for me, now's a good time. I just wanted to cover the staffing and the morale and things like that, and what we're doing right now. We're sitting good. We're doing okay over here at ACPD, and just for everybody's information, if you come visit us, we've gone back in the county office buildings to requiring masks being worn. I don't know if UVA's done that. If anybody knows, they may have. Brian, you may know.
They have.
So
they have.
Okay, so we're requiring that here just for everybody's information. If you're visiting one of the office buildings, we're requiring masks, and our staff wears a mask as well.
Okay, Brian, you have anything for the chief briefly?
No, Chief, just thank you for your leadership. Thanks to your department too, and thanks for laying that foundation for the body-worn cameras. I really am appreciative of that.
Thank you, sir.
Diane, do you have anything quick for the chief?
Really quickly, Ron, at some point, if our group could have an update on your work and the committee's work around working with Mental Health Association and the mental health issues that, I know you were looking at how could we partner with the community and figure this out, right? So that you all aren't responding by yourselves to the multiple mental health issues that we have calls about on a daily basis. So I'd love an update on where that work is. That'd be great.
Next agenda.
That'd be great.
Wasn't Doug Walker involved in some of those discussions as well?
He sits on the committee, but Sean's driving the boat on that, so Sean can give an update. Major Reeves can give an update at our next meeting.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Very
and
good.
I have one other quick thing. We talk, Donna and I and the Board of Supervisors talk a lot about affordable housing. And what we talk about is the missing middle housing. And I would really be interested in some information or data, something that I can use with the community. Specifically, we reference police officers and teachers. And I'm not sure how to get at this, but I would really like to have some data at some point and have a discussion about how we convince the public, maybe with data, but what it really looks like in your all's world with your force, your police force, and not having or being able to find affordable housing. And I'll let it go at that for that right now, but I'm very interested in that topic. Thank you.
Okay, very good. John, you have something brief for the chief?
Nothing other than what we've discussed. A very good meeting, a lot of information. Thank you.
All right. Olga, you have something brief for the chief? All right. Donna?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. Donna, you have something brief for the chief?
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. Chief, I want to thank you and Major Reeves for the work y'all have been doing with the recent spate of traffic accidents down in the Scottsville area, and really looking forward to getting that town hall meeting. So thank you so much. I think I've already heard from a number of residents that the increased patrol presence has had a very positive effect on driver culture changes down there. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to thank the committee for their participation and their volunteering for our CAC. And with that, we're out of time. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Stay safe.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Stay
everybody.
safe. Bye-bye.